The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, but the kind that weighs on your chest, making it hard to breathe. Every seat was taken, the air thick with the smell of expensive perfume and polished wood. At the center of it all sat a little black girl, no older than 12, her small hands gripping the edge of the witness stand. Her feet didn't even reach the floor, yet her presence filled the room more than any adult ever could. Across from her, leaning back with smug confidence, was a man in an immaculate tailored suit, a billionaire whose name was splashed across skyscrapers, tech companies, and luxury brands. His smirk said he had already won. She lifted her chin, and for the first time since the trial began, looked him directly in the eye. And when she spoke, her voice cut through the air sharper than any lawyer's argument. "You may have money," she said slowly, "but you don't have the truth." No one moved. Not the judge, not the jury, not even the billionaire. It was as if the entire room had frozen, waiting for what would come next. The billionaire's lawyers shifted uncomfortably, sensing a storm they couldn't control. Outside the tall windows, the city carried on, horns honking, people rushing to work, unaware that inside this courtroom, a girl was about to change everything. The story had begun long before this day, in a small, cramped apartment miles away from the marble halls of justice. The girl's name was Aaliyah Daniels, and her life had never been easy. Her father, Marcus, was a hard-working mechanic who believed in honesty above all else. He had taught her that your word was worth more than gold, and that no matter how powerful someone was, the truth was the only thing that could outlast them. That belief was what landed him in this courtroom, accused of a crime he swore he didn't commit. A crime that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. The man accusing him was Alexander Voss, a billionaire known for building empires and destroying anyone who stood in his way. He owned the luxury car chain Marcus worked for, and when an internal scandal erupted involving millions in missing funds, Voss pointed the finger directly at Marcus. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Bank transfers Marcus didn't recognize, surveillance footage conveniently showing him entering a restricted office, and forged signatures on documents. It was a perfect trap. And Aaliyah knew it. She had seen the fear in her father's eyes the night the police took him away, but she had also seen something else. Determination. "Don't let them scare you, baby," he had told her through the bars during their first visit. "They can take everything from me, but they can't take the truth." That was the moment Aaliyah decided she wouldn't just sit back and watch. She was going to fight. But she wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't even old enough to drive. All she had was her sharp mind, her father's lessons, and a determination that made her dangerous to people like Voss. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur of whispered conversations with her father's public defender, late nights, spent at the library digging through old news archives and hours learning how to navigate public records. She discovered something most people overlooked. Voss had a history of quietly settling lawsuits, paying off whistleblowers, and burying damaging evidence under layers of corporate jargon. Aaliyah began piecing together a puzzle no one else seemed willing to see. But getting her evidence into court would be nearly impossible. No one wanted to believe a child could uncover what experienced lawyers had missed. That was until she found the key. A piece of footage from a security camera Voss's team thought they had deleted. It didn't show Marcus stealing anything. It showed someone else, a man in the same uniform, the same build, walking into the restricted office minutes before the theft was recorded. And most importantly, it showed that man leaving with a silver briefcase identical to the one in the alleged theft photos. The night before the trial, Aaliyah sat at the kitchen table with her mother, her hands trembling around a cup of cocoa. "You don't have to do this," her mother whispered, eyes glistening. "This isn't your fight." Aaliyah shook her head. It is my fight. They're not just trying to take Dad away. They're trying to take away what he's always told me, that the truth matters. If I let them win, then maybe he was wrong. Her mother's lip trembled, but she said nothing more. She knew there was no stopping her daughter now. And so, here she was, standing in the most intimidating room she had ever entered, staring down a man who thought money could rewrite reality. The judge adjusted his glasses. Miss Daniels, you understand that you're here as a witness for the defense? She nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice didn't waver. The billionaire's lawyer smirked. And you think you have evidence that can clear your father's name? The girl didn't break eye contact with Voss as she answered. I don't think. I know. The first ripple of unease passed through the jury. Somewhere in the back row, a reporter leaned forward, sensing this was about to turn into the headline of the year. What Aaliyah didn't know yet, and what the billionaire was silently calculating, was that revealing this evidence could put her in danger far beyond the walls of this courtroom. Because Voss had secrets, and some people would do anything to keep them buried. The billionaire's lawyer adjusted his cufflinks and rose from his chair with the confidence of a man who had never lost a case in his career. His name was Richard Lane, and he was known in legal circles as the Shark, not because of his appearance, but because of the way he circled his opponents looking for blood. His smile was polite, but his eyes were cold. Miss Daniels, he began, strolling toward the witness stand, I'm sure you're a very smart young lady, but you understand that court is no place for fairy tales. A few jurors glanced at each other, uneasy with his tone. Aaliyah didn't flinch. I'm not here to tell stories. I'm here to tell the truth. Lane chuckled softly, glancing at the jury as if inviting them to share the joke. And you believe you've uncovered evidence that every investigator, every lawyer, every expert in this case somehow overlooked? She met his gaze steadily. Yes. From his seat, Voss leaned back, one hand resting on his chin as if this was a mildly amusing performance. He was a man used to controlling narratives, to making people believe what he wanted them to believe. But there was something about the way the girl spoke, the way her voice carried, that made him shift ever so slightly in his chair. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Daniels, you may present your statement. She nodded, then reached for a small black USB drive from her pocket. Every eye in the courtroom followed her as she held it up. This contains footage from the security cameras at Voss Automotive headquarters. Footage your team claimed was deleted. Lane's head snapped toward her. Objection, Your Honor. This so-called evidence was never submitted during discovery. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. I'll decide whether it's admissible after review. Miss Daniels, continue. She handed the drive to the bailiff, who plugged it into the courtroom monitor. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy black and white footage of the restricted office. The jury watched as a figure in a company uniform entered the room. The timestamp matched the day of the alleged theft. But as the camera zoomed slightly, it became clear. The man's build was broader than Marcus's, and his gait was different. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, not the cautious steps of a thief. Seconds later, he emerged carrying a silver briefcase. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Lane's jaw tightened. Voss's smirk faltered. This man, Aaliyah said, pointing to the screen, is not my father, but he works for Mr. Voss. His name is Calvin Reddick, head of internal security. The room erupted into whispers. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Lane forced a laugh. A coincidence at best. This proves nothing about the theft. Aaliyah's eyes didn't leave Voss. Then maybe the jury should hear what Calvin Reddick told the police before this footage was deleted. I have the transcript. Lane's face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. Your Honor, this is outrageous. No, the judge said firmly. This is relevant. Proceed. From her bag, Aaliyah pulled out a folder and handed copies. To the judge, the prosecution, and the defense. In his statement, Mr. Reddick claimed he was in that room to retrieve sensitive documents for Mr. Voss. He admitted to delivering the briefcase directly to Mr. Voss's personal office. The jury leaned forward. And, she continued, her voice steady, the statement was marked confidential and sealed under internal corporate review. The same week my father was arrested. A pin could have dropped in that courtroom and been heard. Voss's eyes narrowed, but his expression didn't fully break. Still, Aaliyah saw it, the faint flicker of calculation behind his calm exterior. She knew she had hit a nerve. The judge looked at Lane. "Mr. Lane, do you wish to cross-examine?" Lane hesitated for the first time. He glanced at Voss, who gave the faintest nod. Then he turned back to Aaliyah. "Tell me, Miss Daniels, how did you come across this footage? Surely a child couldn't hack into corporate servers?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "I didn't hack anything. I used the Freedom of Information Act to request public surveillance backups stored on municipal servers. The footage was archived automatically before anyone could delete it." Lane blinked. He hadn't expected that answer. Aaliyah leaned slightly forward in her seat. The truth has a way of surviving, even when powerful people try to bury it. The room went still again, but as she spoke, she noticed something unsettling. In the back of the courtroom, a man in a dark suit was watching her intently, his hands folded, his eyes cold. He wasn't part of the jury. He wasn't a reporter, and something about the way he tilted his head made her stomach knot. For the first time, Aaliyah felt a flicker of fear, because she realized Voss wasn't just playing defense anymore. He was preparing to strike back. The moment court adjourned for recess, the room erupted into a low roar of voices. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and the jurors avoided each other's eyes, as though the weight of what they had just seen was too heavy to process in casual conversation. Aaliyah stepped down from the stand, her father giving her a proud but worried glance. "You okay, baby?" Marcus asked quietly. She nodded, but her voice betrayed her tension. "Yeah, just feels like they're watching me." Her father's brow furrowed. "They?" She tilted her chin toward the back of the courtroom. The man in the dark suit was gone. Before Marcus could respond, Lane brushed past them with a tight smile. "Impressive performance," he murmured. "But this isn't a school debate club, Miss Daniels. Evidence like that has a way of disappearing." Aaliyah met his gaze without blinking. "So do liars." Lane's jaw twitched, but he said nothing more, melting back into the crowd. They were halfway down the courthouse steps when a black SUV rolled to the curb. Its tinted window lowered just enough for Aaliyah to see the sharp outline of Voss's face. "Miss Daniels," he called smoothly, his voice almost polite. "You should know. Battles with me don't end in court. They end where I decide." "They do." Marcus instinctively stepped in front of his daughter. "Stay away from her." Voss smiled faintly. "That depends on her next move." The window rolled up, and the SUV pulled into traffic. That night, Aaliyah sat in her bedroom, scrolling through her phone trying to find any other overlooked evidence. But the image of Voss's expression stayed burned into her mind. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. A notification popped up on her laptop, an encrypted message from an unknown sender. It read, "They're coming for the rest of your files. Midnight. Be ready." Her pulse quickened. She checked the IP trace. It led nowhere. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. By 11:45 p.m., she had packed her laptop, the USB drive, and every printed document into a backpack. She was about to move the files to an offline drive when she heard the faint crunch of gravel outside her window. She froze. Two shadows moved across the yard, tall, deliberate, coordinated. One of them carried something metallic that caught the dim light. Her phone buzzed. Another message. Too late. Get out. She moved fast, slipping her backpack on and grabbing the fire escape ladder. Heart pounding, she climbed down into the alley behind the house, keeping low. She could hear the faint click of her bedroom window being forced open above her. Her feet hit the pavement. She didn't stop running. Somewhere behind her, a man's voice said, "She's on the move." She didn't look back. By the time she reached the old library 2 blocks away, she was gasping for breath. She ducked inside, where the night clerk gave her a curious glance but didn't ask questions. She slid into one of the computer cubicles in the back and opened her laptop. She sent an urgent email to the prosecutor handling her father's case, attaching copies of the footage and the transcripts. She added a note. "If something happens to me, release this to the press immediately." Before she could hit send, the library lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the power cut completely, plunging the building into darkness. Somewhere in the blackness, she heard slow, deliberate footsteps and a voice, low, calm, almost amused. "You've been busy, Miss Daniels." Aaliyah's fingers tightened around the edge of her backpack as the darkness swallowed the library. The footsteps drew closer, each one measured, confident, like the person already knew she had no way out. She took a slow step backward, her shoes making no sound on the carpet. She could just make out the faint glow of the emergency exit sign near the far corner. The voice came again, this time from a different direction. "You think you're clever, but clever girls get caught. And when they do, they're forgotten." Her mind raced. 2 of them, maybe 3. One blocking the front, one circling the back. The fire exit was her only chance. She moved quickly but quietly, weaving between the tall shelves of books. The air felt heavier now, the silence broken only by the faint hum of a suppressed flashlight beam sweeping across the floor. She was 5 steps from the exit when a silhouette filled the doorway. Not thinking, she grabbed the nearest thing, a thick hardcover, and hurled it. The man grunted, startled, and she slammed into him with all her weight. His flashlight clattered to the ground, rolling across the floor. She hit the crash bar on the exit door and burst out into the alley. Cool night air hit her face as she ran, her backpack thumping against her back. The men shouted behind her. Footsteps pounded the pavement. She cut sharply down a side street, ducking behind a dumpster. Her breathing was ragged, and she could feel her heartbeat in her ears. From her hiding place, she watched one of the men pull out his phone. "We lost her," he said into it. "But she's got the files. She'll head to court tomorrow. We'll be ready." The other man muttered something she couldn't hear. Then they disappeared around the corner. Aaliyah stayed hidden for a full 5 minutes before she dared to move again. By the time she got home, it was nearly 3 a.m. Marcus was pacing the living room. When he saw her, relief washed over his face, but it was quickly replaced by worry. "Where were you?" "They tried to break in. At the library, too," she whispered. "They know about the files. They're going to try something in court." Marcus's expression hardened. "Then we make sure they can't." The next morning, the courthouse was buzzing with reporters and spectators. Whispers filled the air, rumors that Voss had brought in a new legal team overnight. Aaliyah felt the tension in her father's hand as they walked inside together. The prosecutor gave her a curt nod, then leaned in close. "Whatever you have, now is the time." She opened her backpack and handed over a sealed envelope. "This is everything. And there's more waiting online if anything happens to me." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow but said nothing, tucking the envelope into his briefcase. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. But before the trial could resume, the double doors at the back swung open, and in walked Victor Voss himself, flanked by 2 bodyguards, his eyes locked on Aaliyah. The smile on his face wasn't just confident, it was a challenge. Victor Voss moved with the slow confidence of a man who believed the law existed only for people who couldn't afford to break it. His tailored suit shimmered faintly under the courtroom lights, and his gaze didn't leave Aaliyah even as he took his seat. The judge's gavel struck once. "We will resume testimony." Aaliyah felt every pair of eyes in the room on her as she stepped forward. Her palms were damp, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Your Honor, before I speak, I request that the evidence I've submitted be played for the court." The judge gave a small nod to the clerk. The screen flickered to life. First came documents, bank transfers, offshore accounts, contracts signed in the dead of night. Then, a video clip. Voss in his penthouse, speaking casually to another man. "Your deal's safe," Voss said in the footage. "By the time anyone catches on, we'll have moved the money 10 times. They'll be chasing ghosts." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Voss's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection! This is illegally obtained." "It's not." Aaliyah cut in, her voice ringing clear. "Every file was public at some point. He just thought no one was paying attention. But I was." The judge motioned for order. The crowd quieted, leaning forward. Aaliyah took a breath, her eyes locking on Voss. "You mocked me once," she said, her voice low but carrying. "You looked at my shoes and saw someone small, someone invisible. But the thing about invisible people, Mr. Voss, is that we see everything. We hear everything. And when the time comes, we speak." Her words hung in the air. You could hear the hum of the ceiling lights. Voss's smirk faltered for the first time. She continued, her voice steady. "I am my father's witness. I am his advocate. And I am the reason your empire is falling apart right now." The prosecutor slid another document onto the judge's bench. "Motion to add charges of fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation." The judge looked at Voss, then at his silent, pale-faced lawyers. Motion granted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Cameras flashed. Voss leaned back in his chair, eyes cold, but the set of his jaw told everyone in the room that the untouchable billionaire had just been touched. When the gavel fell, the sound was like a verdict in itself. Aaliyah turned to her father. His eyes were wet, but his smile was unshakable. "You did it," he whispered. She allowed herself one deep breath, the weight of weeks lifting from her shoulders. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the scales of power had shifted, and she had been the one to push them.